Keir Starmer, the Cabal, and the risk of global conflict. A deep dive into the political and economic realities. The assertion that Keir Starmer, the leader of the United Kingdom, is acting under the orders of a shadowy cabal to manipulate the lives of the British people taps into a long-standing narrative about covert power structures. In this analysis, we explore the plausibility of this claim, its implications for British and global politics, and its connection to the broader geopolitical landscape, particularly the dynamics involving the US, Russia, and the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. We also examine the possibility that the US might be using international conflict to address its staggering $36 trillion national debt. Keir Starmer and the influence of the Cabal. Keir Starmer has presented himself as a moderate leader aiming to restore stability to the UK after years of Brexit-related turmoil and political uncertainty. However, some view his leadership as being influenced by hidden, more nefarious forces. The term cabal suggests a group of elites who operate behind the scenes, shaping policies that affect millions, often to serve their own financial or ideological interests. For Starmer to be toying with the lives of the British people, as suggested, would mean that his government's policies, be it economic, social, or military, are not genuinely aimed at national well-being, but instead serve the interests of external power players. Whether one subscribes to the view of the cabal as literal or metaphorical, the idea reflects a broader concern that democratic governments may be puppets in the hands of unelected elites. Starmer's positioning, particularly in the context of Ukraine and the larger US-Russia confrontation, raises questions about whether the UK is acting independently or as a pawn in larger global chess games played by those outside of elected office. If Starmer indeed believes that his actions will push the US into risking a nuclear conflict with Russia, it implies an underestimation of global realities, particularly America's internal challenges. The US, Russia, and the endgame in Ukraine. The ongoing war in Ukraine has been a central issue in international politics, and it has drawn intense involvement from the US and NATO. The claim that Starmer or others might believe this conflict could provoke full-scale nuclear war reflects the precariousness of the current geopolitical climate. Yet, this perspective also underscores a potential misreading of the strategic calculus of both Washington and Moscow. Washington's military-industrial complex, often blamed for perpetuating war for profit, has certainly had a hand in sustaining the Ukraine conflict. However, the idea that the US would be willing to risk total annihilation through nuclear war is, as suggested, technicolor fantasy. Nuclear deterrence has long been based on the principle of mutually assured destruction, MAD, which ensures that neither the US nor Russia would emerge unscathed from such a conflict. Recent developments in Ukraine suggest that the war is indeed reaching a turning point. Ukraine's counteroffensive has slowed, and there is growing fatigue among Western powers, particularly the US, regarding the continuous financial and military support required to sustain Kiev's resistance. Meanwhile, Russia, under Vladimir Putin, has remained resilient, strategically adjusting to the sanctions and military pressure, all while maintaining a calculated, cool-headed response. Unlike what might have been expected by Western leaders and the supposed cabal, Putin has not lashed out or escalated the war into a broader conflict, which may be a reflection of a long-game strategy rather than impulsive reactions. The U.S. national debt and the specter of war. The most compelling aspect of this analysis is the notion that the U.S. is using conflict, perhaps even the Ukraine war, as a means to address its staggering $36 trillion national debt. Wars, historically, have been used by governments to reshape economic realities. The U.S. economy, deeply intertwined with its military-industrial complex, has benefited from war spending, particularly in terms of driving technological innovation and stimulating demand for military goods and services. However, to suggest that war with Russia could erase the U.S. debt may be an oversimplification. First, while war can create economic booms for certain sectors, it also leads to enormous costs, both human and financial. The Iraq and Afghanistan wars, for example, added trillions to the U.S. debt rather than reducing it. Moreover, war with a nuclear power like Russia would not yield any clear economic gain. On the contrary, it would likely lead to unprecedented global destruction, wiping out both creditors and debtors alike. Second, the idea that the U.S. might provoke a major war as a way of managing its debt assumes that war is a controlled and manageable enterprise, which history has proven false. Even if conflict results in regime changes or geopolitical shifts, the global economy is so interdependent that any major war between nuclear powers would devastate economies across the board, including those of the victors. The role of London's bankers. The final point of the analysis suggests that the bankers in London, who are portrayed as owning part of the Federal Reserve, should pay for the consequences of these global policies. The financial sector, both in the UK and the US, is deeply entwined with global economic governance. The idea that bankers are behind the scenes pulling the strings has long been a popular theory among those critical of international finance. London, as a historic global financial hub, certainly holds influence, and its ties to the Federal Reserve reflect the globalized nature of financial systems. However, while the financial elite certainly benefit from certain policies, they are not likely in control of national security decisions regarding nuclear war or the global order. The mention of London bankers owning a portion of the Federal Reserve speaks to a broader distrust of international financial systems. While the Federal Reserve is technically owned by member banks, it operates under U.S. government oversight, and the notion that foreign bankers directly influence its policies is often exaggerated. Nonetheless, it highlights the perception that financial elites are insulated from the consequences of war and economic upheaval, leaving ordinary citizens to bear the brunt of the fallout. Conclusion: a complex web of interests. The notion that Keir Starmer is acting under the direct orders of a cabal to manipulate the fate of the British people taps into a broader narrative of disillusionment with political and financial elites. While there are certainly powerful interests at play in global politics, the idea that the U.S. would willingly risk nuclear war to erase its debt stretches the boundaries of plausibility. Instead, what we are witnessing is a complex web of geopolitical, economic, and military interests, where elites, governments, and corporations are maneuvering for power and profit, often at the expense of ordinary people. In the end, as the Ukraine war inches toward resolution and global powers recalibrate their strategies, it will be the citizens of the world, not the elites, who will feel the deepest impacts.